the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel, and some of the king's descendants, and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision in the king's delicacies, and the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave the names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. So we're going to dive into this line by line, verse by verse, as it's always my opinion. So before I dive into this, what happens when you go into a culture, right? In this case, they were exiled, so they were part of the first exile. So there was like 3 waves of it during when Babylon conquered Israel and Jerusalem. There's 3 waves. They were in the first wave. Okay? A lot of stuff going on at this time. A lot of stuff in the world. And I'm going to go over everything that's going on in the world, like all the big things going on in the world at this time. But brainwashing, there's cultures that try to brainwash people. And I'm going to give you an example. I was in the Marine Corps, so they try to brainwash you right off of that, right? So what they did for me, when you're going to Parris Island, South Carolina, right? They bring you at like 1 or 2 in the morning. So you've been up all day, and they don't tell you you're going to be up another 2 days. Like awake, you cannot go to sleep, right? So as we pull up, there's just one road in, one road out. It's literally an island. And they tell you to put your head down, right? So you're riding on the bus with a whole bunch of guys, and then they start like getting nasty with you now at this point, right? So you put your head down, right? Like, don't look up, right? You go down, and all of a sudden, some big dude starts yelling at you, and you can't really see him. He starts yelling, he says, get off the bus. And we have to go stand on these famous yellow footprints. If you're like anything Marine Corps, you know about the yellow footprints, right? You stand in the line, and all of a sudden, they're just running you through everything. They start shaving your head. I was smart. I shaved my head beforehand, but that only lasted the week that I had it. Because what happens is they shave your head, and Tito knows, right? You're a barber, right? They skip it. So I had like patches all over my head, and everyone did. And you know when you get a haircut and you have all this stuff around your neck? Yeah, no, they just left it there. You're just nasty. You're just nasty through boot camp. And I just thought about all the things that they used to say. You say, oh, that's nasty. And you learn a completely different culture. And you think about it. I was there for 4.5 years. These guys were training for 3 years. You can imagine the paradigm shift in their thought process. Right? And that when I was going through this brainwashing process, there's cultures and there's countercultures. And there's cultures all over the place. If you look at a culture here in Dumont, go to Norwood, different culture. Go to Alpine, different culture. Go to Lodi,
Bingo.
Different culture. Yeah, the Italian culture down there. No. But what happens is, the main group of the culture, they try to brainwash. And the culture in America tries to control your thinking, my thinking, and how we should view things. It was very interesting as I was going through this study, because that's what I thought about, how the culture has almost exiled what we came from. They exiled our thought process, and they just shove it with a whole bunch of nonsense. So keep that in mind as we go through this passage. Okay, so where's the famous green thing? Okay, this is the Empire of Babylon right here. Right? This is massive, massive piece of land. They conquered all this. So just so you have an idea of where they're at, so you have the Arabian Desert over here, Jerusalem's over here, Babylon's right here, but like this is the entire empire. And this is obviously modern day Iraq right now. Here's a better look. So you have the Euphrates River, the Tigris River, Babylon, and the way they actually went, they didn't go straight across. They actually went all the way up here and came back down. So it was a very, very long trip for these young men. So this is where they were. So now let's talk about who's in the story. So you have Nebuchadnezzar, you have Jehoiakim, Ashpenaz, said it right. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, from 605 to 592 BC. He's the second king of Babylon, son of Nebuchadnezzar, sometimes called Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar, his father, he was the founder of what later became called the Chaldean or Neo-Babylonian dynasty. So Nebuchadnezzar I flourished in the 12th century, most famous Babylonian king. He reigned from 1119 to 1098 BC, and of the second dynasty of Issian. When you go through the Old Testament, you have to understand the history to understand what's going on at the time. So this is before, obviously. So this is a brick from Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon. The bricks used to obviously construct public buildings, and it actually bore a stamp. Okay? And the stamp, the inscription reads, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the restorer of the temples, the eldest son of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon." So the brick comes from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, and actually this brick right now is in the British Museum in London. So now you have Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, all right? In 2 Kings 23:36, Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother, Zebidah, the daughter of Pedlah and Rumah, of Pedlah of Rumah. 1 Chronicles 3:15, the sons of Josiah were Johanan, the firstborn, the second Jehoiakim, the third Zedekiah, and the fourth Shallum. Jehoiakim was king of Judah in 609 to 597 BC. His given name was Eliakim. Couldn't just be Mike, right? And it means God will establish. He replaced his older brother as king, Jehoahaz, who was king for 3 months. And Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king. And Jehoiakim means Yahweh will establish. So the Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king, the place of his father Josiah, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. So the Pharaoh took Jehoahaz and went to Egypt, and he died there. So the Pharaoh of Egypt changed his name. Here's what was happening in the world at the time. You had the construction on the Acropolis in Athens began. Mayan civilization flourished in Mexico. You had Confucius and Buddha lived. Greek art began truly to excel. Phoenicians made the first known sea journey around Africa, and Greeks introduced idolatry to Italy. You also have the beginning of Taoism. You guys know what Taoism is? Yin and Yang? So at this time, so you had Buddha, Confucius, and Taoism all at the same time. Then you had Daniel, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel You have some big major prophets there. And they're saying that Ezekiel and Daniel were born around the same time. So, but they were both exiled at the same time. And you notice Ezekiel, end time prophet, right? You have Daniel, end time, you have Daniel 70 weeks. And you have the prophets of the Messiah. You have all these major things happening all at once around a similar area. And I just thought that was just amazing because around 1800 BC is when Hinduism started. Ashpenaz, he was the chief eunuch of Nebuchadnezzar, responsible for summoning exiles like Daniel to serve. Eunuchs in the ancient world, they're typically used in ancient Near Eastern cultures in service to royalty, were perceived to be loyal around women, could have roles such as statesmen, military generals, palace officials, guarded female quarters. What's a eunuch? Yes and no. Yes and no. Sometimes they were castrated, sometimes they weren't. So that's an interesting translation because it could mean a statesman or someone of prominence, or it could be someone that was castrated when it's translated to English. Okay. So it's an interesting twist on it because that's why you have to go through who's who and who's what. So if they're obviously guarding females in a royal palace or something, yes, typically they were castrated at that time. So eunuchs in the Old Testament usually portrayed as authoritative figures. A royal servant, Esther refers to a eunuch who was custodian of the women. So you have kind of both ends. You have someone that was prominent, and you have someone that was unfortunately, ouch. Sadis. So sadis is a word in Hebrew, it means eunuch or high official. It's an interesting one. So they have high office in the palace, royal court, and then they may or may not be castrated. Now you have Daniel, taken to Babylon in 597 BC. Lived until the first year of King Cyrus in Daniel 1:21. Born, it's about 621 BC. He was about 16 years old when he was taken. Very impressionable age, what Babylon did at this time and who they took. And probably descended from Jewish nobility, as we will see in verse 3. So now we get into the passage. In verse 1, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Now, the cross-reference to this, parallel passage would be Jeremiah 25:1. And the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, which was the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So you see, third year and fourth year. Contradiction in Scripture means you should do what? Investigate. Because it's not necessarily a contradiction. I'm going to explain it right now. So the third year, compared in Jeremiah, obviously 25:1, and the fourth year, Jehoiakim, all right, came to the throne at the end of the year, which Jeremiah reckons as the first year, but Daniel leaves out of count, being an incomplete year. So there was two types of reckoning when it comes to time, when it comes to royal, like a kingship or a time frame. So there was this Palestinian system. So Daniel's method of reckoning differs from the Palestinian system, which that was Jeremiah. But there was a Babylonian system, which Daniel used. And that's why you see a slight difference. So you see the fourth year. And the Babylonian system, they start a reign at the new year. So if someone became king in September, they're not going to start to count until January, the new year. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's the contradiction, but it's really not a contradiction. It's coming from two people from two separate cultures, because where was Daniel at the time? And right after that? He was always in that area for a very long time. And so he would have learned the Babylonian system. Because remember, he's training for 3 years. Verse 2. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of God, to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. So it was very customary at the time. So what happened is, you have these heathen temples, right? They used to store sacred jewels, valuables, and anything that was special property, right? And they used to put it in the room with the idol in which they worshipped. So Babylon conquering Israel and Jerusalem, they went into the temple and took all the valuables, and they put it into this room with a statue of their god. So it goes even further. And this was in the temple of Belus at Babylon, side by side with the costly ornaments and utensils that were appropriated for idolatrous worship. They used Jerusalem's stuff to worship their gods. It's pretty messed up. So in the Temple of Jerusalem, there were also rooms for specialty to set apart for tithes and storage of valuable articles and belong to the temple. So these sacred objects, including idols, at the time, many types of vessels used to worship, were taken hostage when people were conquered. A way of demonstrating the power of one's own God over the other gods, which they conquered. They used to desecrate their sacred objects or place them in position of submission to their God that they worshipped. So if you had now these gods are little g's, right? Little g gods. So they have their little g god over here, and if they conquered a city or something like that, or a country, they used to take their valuables and put them in submission lower than them. It's common. It's common in the Middle East to go lower than someone. Like in the Thai culture, when you meet the king, you're supposed to go lower than the king to show obedience, right? Here, the land of Shinar is very important because the land of Shinar has been around for a while. The land of Shinar. So if you look at the land of Shinar, it's over here. This is where the temple was, right? Babylon. But you also see the name is distinct in Babylonian, mentioned exclusively in the Bible, this place. It's nowhere else is mentioned. The plain of Shinar is comprised of a region approximately from the modern-day Baghdad to the Persian Gulf. It was established all the way back in Genesis. See, Genesis 10:10, at the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, in the land of Shinar. So this is like Genesis 10. This is the way the world looked. So you have Magog up here. You have Shinar. So Uz up here. So this is how the ancient world actually looked in Genesis. I'm going to take a picture of that. Now another key word here in verse 2, you see his God. Does anyone know the chief god they worshipped in Babylon?
Baal. Moloch.
Marduk, which is actually a form of Baal. But his name is Marduk. He was the chief god of Babylon, supreme Babylonian deity, worshipped as a god of creation and destiny. Blasphemous, huh? Marduk, also called Bel, was originally the local city god of Babylon. However, was Babylon increased in power. So he was the local city god. As they increased in power, Marduk achieved preeminence over the whole Mesopotamian deities. So remember, as they conquered, they took the other gods in submission. They actually also took their idols and put them in submission. So Marduk is on the right-hand side. And this is Tema. So Merodach, or Marduk, in the Babylonian epic of creation. So this is how he was created, the story. So here. Tiamat, chaos monster and primordial goddess of the ocean. So the one on the left, right? Was the goddess of the ocean. Mates with Abzu, god of the fresh water. She gives birth to the first generation of gods. What does that sound like? Greek mythology, right? Mm-hmm. Very similar, because you have the Titans who gave birth to the Greek gods, Zeus and all that stuff, right? Then attacks them and is killed by the storm god Marduk. His name is mentioned in scripture and is also part of the name of Babylonian ruler Merodach Baladan. Marduk has given me an heir. That's what it means. Merodach Baladan. Marduk has given me an heir. So you have all these like stories that are very similar in nature, like God's giving birth to gods. Think about that. God's giving birth to gods. It's a lot of occultism, right? So you see New Age. New Age, not some New Age now, right? Here was a coin. This profile portrait of Nebuchadnezzar was found engraved on an onyx stone that formed the eye of the statue of Marduk, patron deity of the city of Babylon. The message of the sculptor is clear because Nebuchadnezzar is dear to Marduk, who keeps him close as his own eye, kind of like being the apple of your eye concept. Successful conquerors of that time, like Nebuchadnezzar, who conquered Jerusalem, invariably claimed a special place in their deity's affection. So you should use this as the eyeball of the statue for their deity. Now, verses 3 and 4. Aspenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. So the traditional Babylonian language, does anyone know it? Traditional language? Huh? Aramaic was the diplomatic language, so that was spoken by all nations in the area. It was actually Akkadian. It's actually a really complex language. So what they used to do is ancient language, they used to use cuneiform. You know what cuneiform is? It's like a whole bunch of symbols that obviously it's some type of writing. And what they used was to make a wedge-shaped character. So they used a stylus to make wedge-shaped characters in which each symbol represented a syllable. But Aramaic, they were forced to speak Aramaic to the Babylonians so they can understand them. So Aramaic was a common language in Akkadian. So this is what cuneiform looks like. It's pretty crazy, right? So cuneiform. So this one is from Nebuchadnezzar 2. So the one that's actually in the book of Daniel. So it shows 3 columns from cuneiform, text recording his genealogy, titles, and reverence of the gods, Marduk and Nebo, or Nebu, and describing his great works and the beauty of his city. That's what your summary of that is. Now verse 5. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. But wait, I thought they were captives. They were captives, right? So obviously, first, this is really interesting because the Hebrew boys, this would be something that's very luxurious to them, right? Because it's in contrast to what they're used to as more of a plain diet. So obviously, in verse 8 and further down, Daniel requested for himself and his companions to not eat that, but eat vegetables and fruits. So the Babylonian king and nobles were noted for their high living. Their tables were loaded with wheat breads, meats, and great variety of luscious fruits. The usual beverage was wine of the best varieties, and most of them were fond of drinking in excess. Ancient Persian kings followed the custom of the Babylonian monarchs and fed their attendants from their own tables. You know how ingenious this is? This is genius. You know why? He took people captive, right? Around 16 years old. And he fed them from their table. He gave them the best food. When someone's typically taken captive, they're put where? In some type of cell. They're in bondage, right? They weren't in bondage in the physical sense. Literally, they're in bondage. They couldn't leave Babylon. But they could eat at the king's table. Would you ever see that if someone was held captive now? No. POWs? No. You see their stories? No. Never happened. It's ingenious. Because that's an impressionable age, teenagers. At 16 years old? Don't you remember the songs when you were 16 years old, right? All that stuff? And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's smart, what he did, because he wanted to take over. And he actually used it more. So daily provisions. So those who received rations from the Neo-Babylonian period included certain ranking members. So you had administrators, craftsmen, artisans, native and foreign. So they used to bring people in, build something, artisans, or do kind of art, and then they used to feed them. So you had diplomats, businessmen, entrepreneurs, as well as political refugees and members of royal families who had been deported to or were being held hostage in Babylon, just like what we said. And like we said before, Daniel was probably from a noble family, right? So delicacies. This is actually really interesting because packed bag, it means food and provisions. There's actually no mention of the type of food that was being served. Even in a lot of history books, they actually didn't talk about the Babylonian diet besides like the meats and stuff like that. It needs to go into specifics of what they were eating. So I thought that was interesting. Some people are like, oh, they were eating pig. I'm like, I didn't really see it.
Yak.
Yeah. Game meat. 3 years of training. The curriculum lasted 3 years. So 3 years, think about it. What's about 3 years long? Curriculum. You have college could be 3 years if you push it. You have master's degrees that could be 3 years, right? So 3 years is a very long time. And you're talking about day in and day out being taught. So during which the young men were developed into competent statesmen to be used for the advance of the Babylonian kingdom. Of course they were going to schmooze them. Of course. So a royal grant was to perpetuate the Babylonian system of cultural, political, social, and economic values. The education was intended to brainwash the youths and to make them useful Babylonian subjects. So they stole them, and now they're going to use them to further their kingdom, right? So this 3 years of training. So the purpose, so for the food, the education was simple. It was the effort for total indoctrination, working to make these young Jewish men leave behind their Hebrew God and culture. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to communicate to these men, look to me for everything. Daniel and his friends refused, insisting that they look to God. So he wanted to be a God to them. John Calvin commented on this. Nebuchadnezzar knew that the Jews were stiff-necked and obstinate people, and that he used the sumptuous food to soften up the captives. Yeah. So imagine 16 years old, getting deported, like 500 something miles, right? You have to live somewhere else. You can't worship your God. You have to learn all this stuff about another culture so you can further their kingdom, and I'm just going to keep feeding you food. That's what they did. Here are the 5 principal classes in which they were studying for. You had the astrologer / scribe. They were kind of hand in hand. You had a diviner, exorcist, physician, chanter of lamentation, which is like a music player. So in verse 20, exorcist was a term used to describe those compared to Daniel and his friends as an exorcist. It would not be unusual for an individual to be trained in a number of these disciplines. Training foreigners for these positions was expected as a result of assimilation of the best of the brightest of the next generation. You know who did that too? Who was focusing on the next generation? Hitler, yes. Hitler focused on the children and indoctrinating them into the next generation. So their skills would benefit the Babylonians rather than their enemies. So they took the best and brightest here. So I got the smartest guys. I have MIT over here, Harvard, Yale. And then they're going to further the whole kingdom. Complete brainwashing. So much of this learning had a practical purpose, so designed to imply that life means astrology, honorology, heptoscopy, and the study of other organs, rites of purification, sacrifice, incantation, exorcism, and other forms of divination and magic. Sounds very familiar, right? Look around. Right? You have occultism all around. So the New Age ain't so new. Satanism ain't all that new, is it? Animal sacrifice is not all that new. Using organs for these special spells, not all that new. This is some old school stuff. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Daniel means God is my judge. Belshazzar, Bel, protect the king. Hananiah means the Lord is gracious. Shadrach means command of Aku. So the Lord is gracious to command of Aku is another deity. Mishael means who is like the Lord. Meshach, who is what Aku is. Azariah means the Lord is my helper. Abednego, servant of Nebo, or called Nebo. Satan uses a similar strategy against believers today. He wants to indoctrinate us into the world system. Satan wants us to feed on what the world offers, identify your name, ourselves in reference to the world, educate ourselves in the ways of the world. Satan does the same exact thing. He tries to brainwash us. And he uses people in certain cultures to brainwash us. For example, so now you have agender, gender fluid, male, female, masculine agender, masculine gender fluid, feminine, you get where I'm going with this, and then in the middle it says uncertain and or all.
Wow.
I saw a video of a girl says like, yeah, you can be whatever you want. Yeah, I'm like, so you can be an alien? Yeah, I'm actually an alien, man, woman, and something else. I was like, what? And this is real, and I'm not like really angry with the individual, because I want to pray for them, because they're being indoctrinated that everything is right. This is moral relativism, and it's at the highest form that everything is right, which is wrong in every which way. There is an absolute truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He didn't say a way, a truth, a life. Like every other religion, it's how you feel towards something. Every other religion. Do you understand in Islam, that to go to heaven, you have to follow the 5 pillars, be a good person, all that stuff. Do you realize that according to Islam theology, even if you're not a Muslim, but you're a good person, you possibly go to heaven? And they're only taking one group of Muslims to heaven. You know what I mean? There's a lot of denominations of Islam. It's a really big religion. It's a lot of denominations, but only taking one. How do they know? They have no assurance of what it is. They think they know. They listen to their imams, and that's it. And now you get Christians who just listen to someone preaching, or they listen to the radio, they listen to some videos. They don't read the word from themselves because the Holy Spirit is supposed to be our teacher. That is our first teacher. Hinduism, it's kind of whatever you feel. As you go through it, you have like 330 million deities. Taoism, the light and the darkness has to be equalized goes against everything Christianity stands for, everything the word stands for. Because the Lord is going to defeat evil completely. There's going to be a new heaven, a new earth, a new Jerusalem. We're going to have glorified bodies. But here, what they're trying to do is they're trying to indoctrinate people and kids. Hey, listen, you know what? Hey, you can be whatever you want to be. In the sense that you can change your sex. You can't change biology. I'm sorry. Chromosomes. X, Y, XX. I don't know. You can't fix it. How about this? False evolution. Been taught in the school system. Now transgender is being taught in the school system too now. What did I say? They want to indoctrinate who? Not us. The kids.
Yep.
They want to indoctrinate kids. They teach false evolution. You have false evolution. They say that we came from apes. We're animals too. Why not? But that's true evolution. Man realizes he's a sinner, gets on his knees and praises God, and asks for forgiveness for repentance. Humanism. Warning, it's not all about me. It's not all about us. And that's the biggest thing in this world is humanism. I think the biggest religion is humanism. Because people think because they have an opinion on something, it matters. And it necessarily doesn't. Particle physics, if I have an opinion on it, guess what? They're not going to listen to me. Because I don't know anything about it. Really, think about it. People make these videos, these YouTube videos, and they sound ridiculous on the YouTube video. And you'll have 12 million likes or 12 million views or something like that, and a whole bunch of likes and comments and all that stuff. And people just focus on that. And they think that, hey, listen, I can just go out and say whatever I want. It's okay. There's no repercussions. I'm like, there are repercussions. Because there's a judgment. There's going to be a judgment. And we need to realize that too. And now when we're sharing the gospel with people, we have to do it in a loving way. And when we're sharing this, and this is a hard thing, because I'm a millennial. I see millennials. I see other millennials. And they're like, well, whatever I say matters. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Sorry. Whatever I say doesn't matter either. And it's true. And that's reality. But I'll tell you who matters. It's God. Whatever He says matters.
Facts.
And what matters is how you view God. That's what matters. So humanist presuppositions, mental conclusions, big government, self-centered, situation ethics, man is an animal, no God, salvation, or eternity. Awesome, right? I came from primordial ooze. Which I would have more time, I would go over that argument. So now we have to apply now. It's not about your self-esteem, it's about self-denial. God created us in His image and has a purpose for us no matter what the world says. The world says you're this, you're ooze, and God says, no, you were created in His image. He gave you a purpose. He gave you a mind. He gave you a spirit. He gave you a soul. He gave you a personality. And He gave you His word. And He gave you His Son 2,000 years ago to die on a cross for our sins. He took the entire wrath of God for everyone's sin in here. 1 John 4:4 said, you are our God, little children, you have overcome them. Because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Remember my definition of what a Christian is. It's not someone who has a relationship with Christ but has the Holy Spirit dwelling within them. That means that you have God dwelling inside you. God is dwelling inside you. And don't sell to the world because God sold out for you. Every time the world tells you something, tells you what you should be, you put on the full armor of God. He has created you to be. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, and stand firm. And one more thing. Look to God, because Google doesn't have all the answers. Right? The hard thing, we have like so much access to so much stuff now, so much information. It's information overload every day. But God has the answer, and the answer is His love. He has the answer for everything you can think of. He has the answer for the ultimate question, though, is where you're going to end up in eternity. So, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for your blessings, Lord. Once again, thank you for every person that's here right now, Lord. We thank you for just giving us the opportunity to be able to worship